I'm now with a new guest who hasn't featured with us before, Phesto Musonda from Subsahara Gemstone Exchange. I think he likes to call himself a industrialist and entrepreneur, but you've got quite an exciting project with an SEZ zone. Please do tell us more.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to this interview. It's a multi-facility economic zone with facilities supporting trade, also supporting the logistics. And so we plan within there, in terms of logistics, to develop a railway terminal, a regional rail terminal, which will be an internode if you look at, because Ndola is a gateway into Congo. So when we link this in terms of road, we are well networked with the road sector. So we want to develop one of Zambia's biggest inland port to facilitate the trade and the movement of goods. So that's what we are doing as a basic development.
So if I understand correctly, your SEZ is already rail ready? You're connected?
It has a rail, but we have to build a site inter-rail connectivity. But the rail line passes right in front of our yard. We used to have a rail line before, but inside we need to develop this railway link. It's part of the project. We have had a lot of interest from a lot of operators from South Africa, and we are advanced in terms of discussions. We have also spoken to the people doing feasibility study on the Lobito corridor that we should have a railway terminal in Ndola. So we're quite happy that even if you talk about Tazara coming in Ndola, connecting with Zambia Railways, we are just on the spot. Our land is next to the Bonamkobwa rail line terminal for Zambia Railways. So we are well positioned to develop an efficient private sector-led railway link.
And how far are you from actually opening your doors?
We are actually, within the next 6 months, looking at starting some construction, because we have got operators that are coming from South Africa. They are already in discussion with a lot of mining houses to move cargo for them. So we are looking at the people who are doing the logistics to move this mining produce. As you are aware that the projected production in the next 2 years, if you look at Congo today, they're at 2.8 million. Zambia is at 800,000. But with all the transformation happening in the mining sector, in the next 2 to 3 years, we see the figures hitting 5 million plus in both Congo and Zambia. How are we going to move this bulk material? So when you look at the copper, that is outbound. But for every ton of copper, there are chemicals that have to be brought inland. So when you talk about the 5.8 million, as a round trip, we are talking about 8 to 10 million tons being moved both inside the coal mining activity, to support the mining activities, and getting the copper out.
And that's not the only commodity being moved. So there, if you think about the volumes and the tonnages, how are our railway operators without private sector participation going to be able to meet the demand of their customer? The session that you ran earlier today, Bruno said it, 300 million from the EU for road. If government is paying for road, why aren't they paying for rail?
In terms of the current setup, the road is going under a lot of pressure, and there is like an emergency. You need to do some road maintenance. But what is interesting is that with the announcement of the Lobito corridor, we saw already the American government pumping in $250 million only into the pre-feasibility. Yeah. But also when you look at Tazara, we have heard that the Chinese have got interest to take the concession. Yeah. But what it is that the rail sector, if you see that at the moment they are operating at 10% capacity, and I mean in the region. Yeah. So the issue for the rail sector is that we have to transform our policy pronouncements. We need, for example, the regional governments to come up with one policy, one design. I understand the current gauges can work, but when you talk about the American system also, and maybe any system, the gauges when they are investing, we have to employ our current government. And it's very interesting that the regional governments are meeting, and through these institutions and also seminars like Linked Zambia, we come out with one common policy. Private sector is ready to move, but remove the bureaucracy and give it to them. The projected just the copper output, but we're also looking at high energy minerals. We're looking at the manganese, the lithiums, and also what about the grain? Food has to move. What about the mining equipment? What about the other consumption, the wheat and the like? So the potential for putting up an efficient and competitive rail line, not only within our inland, but also throughout these corridors, is amazing. So we need to make sure that we put our act together to make sure that this potential is brought out. 10% is not good. 10% tells you there's something wrong.
We seem to view the road rail as competitors. And I think that narrative needs to change because it isn't actually a competition. They substitute each other very well. And in fact, our truckers would probably be 2, 10, even 20 times busier than they are now if they focused on that first and last mile, integrating from an intermodal perspective with our railway operators and the commodities that needed to be moved, and then dealing with that short, under 200 kilometers. That is ideal for the trucking sector because anything over that is rail. So if we can reduce the handling, the double handling, and we can inspire the investment into our track and our rolling stock, we would move forward from that 10% to maybe even 60%. But where do our governments actually come together and, do that agreement? That's the first thing. And how do we fund it? And we keep saying the private sector, but I'm not sure the private sector has that volume of appetite. I might be wrong.
Now, when you look at what is happening, take for example the DRC and Zambia. The governments have made the law 30% of all mining, let's say copper mining production, has to go on rail. So in terms of the commitment and the law, it does exist. But that law can operate if you have an efficient rail line. Now, as you said, people have been using like air freight, road freight. We are talking about getting the rail line to move most of the bulky material. But trucks carry how many commodities? Spares, for example. Food. You can't transport food by rail like fresh food, for example. So the trucking will continue. It's here to stay. But what happens is that it's a combination. For example, even coming to Zambia, you can drive, you can do other means, you can fly, but those would be choices for Zambia. If we have any emergency supply, can go on the trucking. So this is a collaborative system that has to happen. But it means we need a master plan. We as a region need a master plan from A to Z.
So there is a master plan that's being developed, with the Southern African Development Community. There is a railway regional master plan that has gone out to tender. Deadline was a couple of days ago. So it'll be interesting to see how that impacts, because I think that will bring around that single voice.
Exactly.
In addition to that, we also have the African Agenda 2063 and the African Integrated Railway Network, which I think, again, will add a layer to that policy. And then, follow that by, the African Continental Free Trade Area, which will, if we think about the impact of that and the improvement of inter-regional trade, it'll be mind-blowing for the rail sector.
Exactly.
But we do not have enough track and we do not have enough rolling stock.
Exactly.
And we're running out of time.
Yes. If you look, for example, even besides the rolling stock, all the skilled manpower, engineers, we have not trained enough on the rail network. We need to put up training facilities to start training rail engineers, rail signaling handlers, the IT system. We need to invest. Our universities, our academia also have to look at this as potential industry to accelerate development, to bring in all new employees. But what we are saying is that, yes, most of these railway networks, even in Europe, sometimes they are subsidized by government. But what we are saying is that with a lot of developmental finance and the interest shown by Europe and America trying to look at this region as a potential supplier of the new energy minerals we call, I think there lies in an opportunity. But what we want is that today, if you look at the road network, the roads, they have got toll gates. There are thousands of owners of trucks who move on these roads and pay a toll. We want also the rail sector to be opened up. They need to allow different players to own wagons, locomotives. All they do is that these state-owned enterprises can run the railways and tow the rail line. There is no need to have one rail line company who's operating. He has to maintain, he has to do everything. We leave them with the core business of purely signaling and getting the toll going. They need to have concessionaires whose role is to maintain a particular section of a rail line for years. Their role is to maintain, make sure it's working. Then you have private operators coming in. There's a lot of development finance. I mean, ultimately, you cannot invest $7 billion in a mining or
and not be able to move.
And not be able to move. So we are saying that.
Or have it so expensive that it makes no sense.
So how will it move? So for you to have, if you look at the next 5 years or in the past 5 years, there's been over 5 billion to 10 billion invested in Zambia and Congo. But why has the 1 billion for the rail not been invested? How will they get? There's a logistic headache that you have to deal with. So development, can you imagine? I mean, when we eat, the body develops at the same time. But can you have one leg growing and the other arm not growing? It can't work. So business is always like that. So my employment is that I think the mining sector players have to be able to give as an off-take agreement. The developers want to change the rail network. But sometimes to get a mining house to sign that, hey, I'm going to use your rail line.
It's the commitment. That upfront commitment underlines or underpins the finance agreement.
Exactly.
To basically act as the guarantee for the money.
It's for the guarantee for the money, exactly.
Yes.
But that has to happen.
I need to bring it back a second to your SEZ zone that you're busy developing. So you touched on skills and spares and stuff like that. Are you considering putting up a workshop, a railway workshop? We
have been trying to get with the players, both in the region, but also those who are making locomotives like in America, the OEMs here, so that we can get them to say, in this Mount Facility Economic Zone, we have repairs, even fabrication of the wagons. If you see, we need a place to maintain the wagons, to fabricate them, because all corridors are coming through Ndola. We want to be service providers at a railway terminal, also at a dry port. The same workshop we are bringing in private players who can maintain trucks and everything. Because sometimes even on the road freight, you find that a driver gets sick, a truck has to work. We need to be service provider. We need service providers who can provide drivers, who can provide different, like even a horse. You can imagine a horse gets damaged, but we need to move. So we are trying to get in all those service providers to be in this.
All right. And 6 months till you open your doors?
6 months we are starting. We are already existing as an economic zone. By the way, this is the same economic zone where the electric battery plant will be set up. So we have invited different players to join us. We are already existing, running, but we are trying to take advantage of the opportunities that are playing that. This is a necessary service provision. We go beyond just repairing the rail, but other service providers should be well placed in the central hub of these corridors.
Well, Mr. Musonda, I look forward to actually seeing that all in action one day, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. We love your magazine. Please, you're doing a great job. Continue doing advocacy, and information is power, as you know.
It is.
This power, and through you, we hope that we can transmit this information. Once again, welcome to Zambia, and continue doing the work that you're doing.